Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Zahmid, your English teacher. I hope that you're doing well and you are all ready and set for English 11. And my dear learners, today we are going to cover a student's learning outcome. This will be our lecture number 2. First, we did our introductory lecture where we talked about how are we going to take this lecture series with you following different student learning outcomes divided into different lectures. Then we did a lecture on with our first lecture, lecture number 1, and we talked about different components, parts, and patterns of sentence, and we talked about the sentence structure. Now in lecture number 2, the previous one was about grammar. This is about vocabulary, the competency of vocabulary, lecture number 2. And we are going to acquire the skill of vocabulary acquisition and application. Now, this is our students' learning outcome that you can see in front of you, which I'm about to read for you. I hope that you're listening. Your questions are very warmly welcome. You can ask your question. Do not put your mic on unmute unnecessarily. Only do it if you want to ask any question or raise your hands. So, our students' learning outcome is acquire and use appropriate words and phrases for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And the other part of the SLO is independently gather vocabulary when considering a word or phrase important for comprehension or expression. Comprehension here means your overall understanding. Now, this is about not only for reading, but writing, speaking, and listening. Now, we need to use appropriate words and phrases. And for its application, we see that we make so many common mistakes in the English language when we are actually using it. So there are common errors and mistakes which I'm going to talk about today in this video lesson, so that you are very well aware of those mistakes and errors when you are speaking English for the next time. Also, we are going to see that how we can gather as much vocabulary as we can when we are speaking in English, when we are reading something, how we can gather the vocabulary using different resources for better understanding and expression. So this is our SLO. It is about acquiring and using appropriate words and phrases. And in that, to avoid any ambiguities, any mistakes, any errors, we need to see some common errors that you can find. Here is the vertical linkage of this SLO with the previous grade, grade 10. It is linked. So, moving on. Before moving on, I need you to read these given sentences on the slide. The list of items are on the desk. It's a beautiful day outside. She almost drove her kids to school every day. My brother's cooking is better than my sister. And he returned back to the office. Now, has everyone read it? All these sentences with me? Okay. So the purpose of showing these sentences in our brainstorming session, you know that in all our lectures, in the upcoming one also, there is a specific time for brainstorming. It is very important that before we begin the lesson, you actually start thinking about it. You start storming your brains so that you can understand the lesson better and put your input forward. So I hope that you have read all these 5 sentences over here. Now, let me tell you very clearly, there are some mistakes in each of the sentence. Can you point them out? Can anybody point out any mistake in the following sentences? Yes, if somebody has raised their hand, they can please ask the question. Yes, Sadia Jannat. Rayan Farooq. Do you have any question, Rayan? Okay, Sadia, would you like to tell the answer? Can you point out the mistakes in these given sentences?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
The list of items.
No, there can be so many other items in one list. So I think this is right. There's some other mistake. Okay. Okay, can you go for the next one? It's a beautiful day outside, or she almost drove her kids to school every day. No. Yes? Okay, thank you, Sadia. I'll just tell you in a while what the mistake was. So, in the first sentence, the list of items are on the desk. Now, we are talking about one list over here. You can see all these circled things. Now, we are talking about just one list. So, there should be is rather than are, right? And it's a beautiful day. There should be an apostrophe over here. She almost drove her kids to school every day. Now, this word, this modifier is placed incorrectly over here. My brother's cooking is better than my sister. Now, the comparison is wrong. He returned back to the school. There is redundancy, repetition, returned back. It is conveying the same message with these two words. One should be eliminated. So all these mistakes, as you can see over here, why are we making them mistakes? Because we are not aware of those common mistakes that we make in English language, and we are not able to use them appropriately in words and phrases. So here are the correct answers. You can see them clearly. The list of items is on the desk. It with an apostrophe. It's a beautiful day outside. She drove her kids to school almost every day. My brother's cooking is better than my sister's or sister's cooking. My brother's cooking is better than my sister's. And he returned to the office, not he returned back to the office, because returning already means returning back. So we don't need to put an extra word back in that. So each one of these sentences have different kind of mistakes that we need to learn and eradicate them next time in our oral and written communication. So all these mistakes you can see now. There are common errors when we are not paying attention. The following are some of the most common errors that occur while tackling questions based on sentence correction. Number one is the lack of subject-verb agreement. Your subject and your verb, they are not in agreement. They are not sharing a good relation that they should be. So for that, as the name implies, the verb used in the sentence should be in accordance with the subject. Both should be either plural or singular as per the context or sense of the sentence. For example, the boy was reading. This is correct because our subject is going well with our verb. We have a very good subject verb agreement. We are using one singular noun with the accordingly with the singular verb. But here the girls were playing. This is also following the correct subject verb agreement because we are using the plural noun girls, and with that we are using the correct verb form that should be there. So, and if we mess it up, if we don't take care of it, and we say the boy were going there, now this is lacking subject verb agreement. So your subject for which you are talking about and the verb should be in accordance with that. So there should be an agreement between your subject and your verb. So this is what we commonly make a very big mistake when we are not taking care of the subject verb agreement. Now, Now there are some common errors like pronoun errors. So pronoun errors occur when pronouns do not agree in number with the nouns to which they refer. If the noun is singular, the pronoun must be singular, not plural. If it is plural, then we will say that there is a pronoun error. And if the noun is plural, however, the pronoun must be plural as well. For example, everybody must bring their own lunch. Now this is incorrect because the noun and the pronoun are not agreeing with each other. We would say everybody must bring his or her own lunch. Now you can see that everybody is including everyone from every gender. So now we should say that everybody must bring his or her own lunch. Not everybody must bring their own lunch, because everybody, every individual we are talking about is a single individual in herself or himself. So we would say everybody must bring his or her lunch in that order. So your nouns should be agreeing with the pronouns. Now, after learning about the subject-verb agreement problem and then the common pronoun errors, let's talk about mistakes in apostrophe usage. Now, I hope that you know about apostrophe. It is a punctuation mark. It refers when we are trying to show some possession or when we are trying to show contraction or short form of something, we use the apostrophes comma. Now, apostrophes are used to show possession. If somebody owns something or possesses something, however, you do not use an apostrophe after a possessive pronoun such as my, mine, our, ours, his, hers, its, their, or theirs. For example, you don't say my mother's cabin is next to his cabin. You don't need any kind of apostrophe over here because this is already showing a possession. Rather, you would say my mother's cabin is next to his cabin. Now, let's read that again. You do not use an apostrophe after a possessive pronoun. These are your possessive pronouns. So you do not add any apostrophe with it. All these pronouns do not require any kind of apostrophe usage. So if you make this kind of mistake, that would be considered very common and unnecessary because it is easily omitted. It can easily be eradicated. So do not add any apostrophe with the possessive pronouns. Next, we have a very common error, which is redundancy. Redundancy means repetition over and again, using two words just for one purpose. For example, I returned back from Karachi. This is incorrect. Redundancy is when we use two or more words together that mean the same. We also say something is redundant when a modifier's meaning is contained in the word it modifies. So it is already contained in the word, and if we still modify it, then this will be incorrect. In this case, the redundancy has to be removed, just like this. I returned back from Karachi. One thing has to go. We say I returned from Karachi. Because if you use return back, return already means coming back. So return back, this extra word back is not necessary. This is a very common mistake. So in this way, we removed redundancy from our sentence and made it correct. Next, would you please repeat again? If somebody is asking someone to please repeat what he or she has said, instead of saying, would you please repeat again, we would only say, would you please repeat it? Repeating is already, it means that saying that again. So you don't need to add an extra again with it. This will be called a redundancy. So redundancy should be removed from our sentences to make them efficient and proper. Next, we have misplaced modifiers. Does anybody here know about modifiers? What do they do? Any question, any answer to my question about modifiers? Okay. Now, modifier means to modify. It is coming from the word modify, which means to add something into it, to modify it, to bring a slight change or an additional extra information. So, when we are using modifiers like adjectives, adverbs, adjuncts, if we are not using them correctly and placing them incorrectly in any other place, this will be considered as a misplaced modifier. So use an adjective directly before the word you want to modify or describe. This can help you avoid confusion or giving something a quality it doesn't have. For example, sitting in the garden, a scorpion stung her. Now this is incorrect because the modifier is not placed correctly. Sitting in the garden, she was stung by a scorpion. Why did we change it? Because we don't know if the sentence is talking about sitting in the garden about the scorpion or about the girl who is being stung by the scorpion. So it is very confusing. So we need to place our modifier at the right place in order to sound correct. So sitting in the garden, she was stung by a scorpion. He only eats fruit. This is incorrect. Rather, we say he eats fruit, he eats only fruit. This is correct. So if you place this before eats, this will become a misplaced modifier. It will be considered incorrect. Now, let's talk about commas. We know that commas are used for breaking up the sentences, for pausing, and for mentioning more than one thing in the list of different items. So, using a comma to join two independent clauses together is a common mistake. If you want to join two independent clauses, you can use a semicolon. Usually, we use the comma to differentiate, to separate two different independent clauses. But this is a mistake. You can rather use a semicolon for that very purpose. So, I ordered pizza. I also ordered garlic knots. Now, instead of this, we would say, I ordered pizza, semicolon, I also ordered garlic knots. So this is the correct use of the for separating these two different parts of sentences. Now, this is what we call an error of comma splice. Now, let's talk about lacking the parallel structure. We know that following a correct structure in a sentence is very important. And if you're not taking care of this thing, you will come across an error. So, parallelism in a sentence relates to the structure of the sentence. In other words, the different phrases or words performing the same function should have the same structure. If the function is same, then the structure should also be the same in the sentence. It is important to use consistent patterns in the structure of your list and sentences. You can see with this example over here, which is marked incorrect. Why? Because it says Hanya likes to shop, paint, and cooking. Now, why are we using ing with cooking when we are not using painting and shopping? This means that there is something wrong with the structure. All these things are in the parallel form, But the last one is breaking the rule. It's breaking the structure. This way we can say that this sentence is lacking our parallel structure. We can say that Hania likes to shop, paint and cook. Now all of these verbs are of the same kind of function and they look the same. No extra ing is added to any one of them. So this is serving the same kind of structure to you throughout the whole sentence. Hania likes shopping, painting and cooking. This is also correct because the structure is parallel. Now, faulty comparisons. When we are comparing two things together, if the comparison does not make any sense, it will be considered faulty. A faulty comparison is one that is not logical. If you are comparing things illogically, then that would be a very huge mistake. Items that are compared must in fact be similar. When things are being compared together, they have to have a similarity between them in order for the comparison to be called logical. So the weather in Canada is colder than Mexico. We are comparing the weather over here, but the weather is not mentioned in the last part of the sentence. This is incorrect. There is no comparison. The weather in Canada is colder than Mexico. We cannot compare weather to Mexico. One is an atmosphere, we are talking about weather, and this one is a country that we are talking about. So there can be no comparison between a weather and a country. We can say the weather in Canada is colder than the weather in Mexico. This is correct because we are now comparing the weather only. So this gives us a clue that the comparison is not faulty, rather it is correct and logical. Now, after learning about all these common errors in English language, whether we are using them in our writing or in our oral communication, we need to take care of these. Even if you know about so much vocabulary and grammar, if you do not care about these kind of common mistakes of subject-verb agreement, parallel structure, comparison, comma issues, pronouns problems, so your sentence will be considered incorrect. Now, we talked about another thing in our students' learning outcome, which was separated by a semicolon. We say that we will be able to gather our vocabulary independently to better our comprehension and expression. So, for that purpose, you are going to look at some resources. And what are these resources for learning your vocabulary? Nothing better than a dictionary, a thesaurus, a glossary for terminologies, and so much more. But dictionaries and thesaurus are the best way to learn vocabulary. And my dear learners, we should always learn vocabulary in a context. There is no point of learning the words in their Urdu meanings. They are useless if you're not using them in the correct context, and if you're not using them with the context for learning purpose. So you can use a physical dictionary or online resources like Merriam-Webster or dictionary.com. You can use Oxford Learner Grammar Dictionary online to look up for unfamiliar words and get definitions, synonyms and antonyms. You can get different etymologies, meaning, sentences, examples, and so much more in any dictionary and thesaurus. You can get them online, you can get them in the hard form. You can install those applications on the Play Store or iOS that you can find in order to download those resources and look for the dictionary, look for the words in a vocabulary. And thesaurus, my dear learners, a thesaurus is just like a dictionary, but you can find a lot of, actually all of the synonyms and antonyms of each word in the thesaurus. So thesaurus and dictionaries, they are very important, and I want you to understand that reading is much more important for learning vocabulary rather than just going through the dictionary. You can read a lot, fiction and non-fiction, and mark the words, annotate them in order to use them in your daily lives, in your writing and in your oral communication. So reading is very important. Now, this is a simulation link that you can watch later on after this video lesson, or maybe some other time, to learn more about different common errors that we make in English language and how we can eradicate them to be a better speaker of English. This is your classroom activity where you have to go through this PPT in the resources, find this passage, read it. It is full of mistakes. Now you need to find out those mistakes and correct them accordingly and rewrite the passage. This is taken from The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini, which is a beautiful novel that you must read. It's a fiction and it has its own taste and perks, so you can read it and get it whether online or in the hard form. Here is your worksheet where you can read the instructions, and then on the second page you can find so many different sentences with modifier mistakes. The modifiers are misplaced. You need to place them correctly. This is your question bank attached with your resources. Now till now, can we take some questions? If anybody has any question, that is very warmly welcome. Here is your skill sheet attached with your resources. For your homework, you need to read the following sentences, identify errors and correct these errors. Now, this serves our purpose for today's lesson, which was about identifying common mistakes, common errors in English language. Now, all these resources, your question bank, your worksheet, skill sheet, this PowerPoint presentation, and finally the lesson plan of this whole students learning outcome, all these are attached in Chases Academy's YouTube video that you will watch on YouTube. You can go to the description and find these resources and download them, take a print and solve those so that you can put your knowledge and your concept learned into practice. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you in the next lecture, lecture number 3, in the next video lesson. Allah Hafiz.